one filmmaker who's recently found himself in quite a bit of controversy as someone that I feel like has really been having a moment seemingly over the last couple of years. I've seen a lot of buzz surrounding Wong Kar-wai here in America. I think a big part of the reason why is because these big lists come out, the top 100 films of the 20th century or whatever, 21st century, right? And almost inevitably recently, Wong Kar-wai gets a placement in those lists. Usually In the Mood for Love is the film that gets put in the top 5 or the top 10 of these big lists that come out.
Sometimes even like right behind Mulholland Drive.
Yep. Sometimes in the top 2 or 3, right? So, people have really discovered Wong Kar-wai recently. People that haven't, already known about his filmography. At least that's what I see online a lot. I see a lot of people talking about Wong Kar-wai recently. And I've always loved Wong Kar-wai. He's one of the directors that really got me into art house and foreign cinema back in the day when I was first getting into movies. But this story broke, Zach, and this was totally crushing. I guess it's been a scandal that's been bubbling underneath the surface a little bit in China, but here in the West, people are just now starting to hear about this and find out about what Jordan in World of Real describes as a career-ending scandal, which again is really intense given the moment that Wong Kar-wai has been having in the West. And obviously, he's a famous filmmaker in China as well, in Hong Kong. People love him, and to see this sort of scandal, this sort of shit hit the fan, it's definitely very unfortunate timing. So before we get into the details of this controversy and of the scandal, do you want to talk a little bit about your own relationship with Wong Kar-wai and his cinema?
Yeah, dude, it's a huge bummer, right? Because you're totally right. After the BBC ranking of the films, of the top 100 films of the millennium, when that first came out, I feel like that was a moment where it was like, whoa, Wong Kar-wai is going to be in the discourse with the Coen brothers, with the Francis Ford Coppola's, Martin Scorsese. Like, he's going to be in the American film bro conversation as one of the all-time greats. And when I was growing up, and my relationship with cinema was like, I had really bad ADHD growing up, so it was hard for me to focus on slower cinema. It was hard for me to really sink my teeth into the richer but not as fast paced. I was much of an action comedy kind of a guy, and so I put off Wong Kar-wai for a long time. And this summer in July, I went and watched a couple of his films. I watched 3 of his films in a row. And then we recently saw Happy together at a screening in New York City about a week ago. And I was blown away by the richness, by the beauty, by how immediately I connected to his work so sincerely, right? A lot of times I have to go into those movies and be like, well, Zach, like, this might not be for you. Like, it's really good and interesting to watch as a film bro, but it might not be something that resonates to you. And I was moved deeply when I watched In the Mood for Love and when I watched Chungking Express. Those were 2 that touched me really, really a lot. And I also thought Happy Together was a really rich portrait. And I was like, this is a man that is an artist. This is a man with a sensitive soul. This is a man who understands the range of the human experience and is such a poet that he can paint it, and a painter, and he just manifests it for you in a way that anybody, even myself, a guy that's totally lived a different life than Wong Kar-wai ever had, could experience it and feel so much. And I was really, really, really bummed when I saw you sent me this morning.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a huge Wong Kar-wai fan myself. I've been inspired by his cinema for basically as long as I've been into art house and international filmmaking, like I said. So the details of this, as unfortunate as they are, it's not going to change my appreciation for his work. I also love Chungking Express, In the Mood for Love. Fallen Angels is probably my personal favorite Wong Kar-wai movie, and I'll continue to love it. Again, I try to separate the art from the artist to the best of my ability. But let's read a little bit about these details, because with that said, this is a pretty hard to swallow. Wong Kar-wai's filmmaking career in China is probably over. I truly don't know how he gets out of this with his reputation intact. The slow-burning disaster surrounding Blossoms Shanghai, which is supposed to have its North American premiere on the Criterion Channel next month, and that's the new television series that he directed. He directed about 20 of the 30 episodes of it. This has now reached a point where it's hard to see how he recovers from it. At the center is Gu Er, a little-known screenwriter who says he wrote substantial portions of the Blossoms script while being paid just 3,000 yen, right, a month? Not as writer, but as Wong Kar-wai's personal assistant. According to Gu, he was responsible for everything from script drafts to cooking meals, all while coping with increasingly debilitating ALS symptoms. For 3 years, he tried to resolve the issue quietly, facing, again, according to him, stonewalling, legal pressure, and attempts to bury his claims. And again, obviously, Zach and I aren't privy to any of the personalities involved in this situation. We're not really aware of exactly all of the details, but this has become an increasingly scandalous controversy, again, in China. It seems to just now be reaching the West as far as people talking about it. But I am seeing other, people reporting on the situation and saying that this is, in fact, a good summation of the Wong Kar-wai shit happening right now, which is really interesting and obviously just heartbreaking considering what Zach said. Wong Kar-wai, his films, they have a very, poetic nature to them. He seems to have an empathetic understanding of the human condition. At least that's what his cinema and his art would lead you to believe. But as is often the case with artists, we find out that that may not be the case, at least at this point in his life, according to these reports. I mean, this paints him as an absolute monster. Obviously, if even half of this is remotely true, exploiting anyone, obviously, on a film production or television production is problematic, but someone with ALS symptoms, increasingly debilitating, I mean, that's just absolutely horrible. And again, if true, I kind of happen to agree with Jordan that it's hard to see how he recovers from that. This is a pretty intense scandal. And I'm also hearing, Zach, that unfortunately a lot of people are saying the show itself, Blossom Shanghai, is not really up to par. It's not really on the same level as the work that he's more celebrated for from the 90s. So you add that on top, and it does seem like maybe Wong Kar-wai should have stayed retired.
I think that's 100% what he should have done. I completely agree with you. And people were correcting us in chat. I guess that's Yuan is how you pronounce, or Yuan is how you pronounce Chinese currency. And I just went ahead and did a conversion. 3,000 Chinese yuan, is that, whatever, Chinese yuan is $421.78. So that was the monthly salary he's paying that guy. Like, what, a little over $100 a week? And you're doing all of this work for a high budget show that's going to end up on international streaming services. And here's the, I guess, spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down, Gavin. I would have been really suspect if this had been something that they were like, this is Wong Kar-wai's best work. I can't believe it. He's finally making a comeback. And then we find out that it was plagiarism, that this unnamed, compensated poor guy suffering from ALS was really like behind the scenes, and it was like some of the best stuff Wong Kar-wai had ever written, because that would make me really concerned deep down that all the Wong Kar-wai we'd seen might not have been all Wong Kar-wai. The fact that this is a disaster leads me to believe that while inexcusable, while obviously just a complete blight on his legacy and something that will be talked about and discussed when we reflect on the canon of Wong Kar-wai, which I think will continue to do because of its impact, and not just on, Hong Kong cinema, but on American cinema. It's had a tremendous impact. That's one of the things that really blew me away. I was glad that I'd seen Wong Kar-wai before I saw Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation, exactly, because it was so influenced by Wong Kar-wai. Or when I saw Celine Song's Past Lives, I was like, wow, that was really influenced by Wong Kar-wai.
Influence everywhere.
Yeah, so I guess as the film fan, as the man who loves this guy's work and has connected to it and has a real sincere appreciation for it as it exists, death of the author, whatever he was to be responsible for in his personal life. I'm at least glad to know I don't have to have any suspicions that wasn't Wong Kar-wai. Like, he probably did do that and then wanted to come out of retirement and realized he wasn't capable of producing this. 20 episodes to direct, that's a fuckload of work.
Yeah.
Only rare guys like David Lynch did it very old. But not a lot of people are like equipped for the rigor that's going to take on your body and mind to write and direct 20 episodes of television like that. And if he was old and he was coming out of retirement, he might have just been like, fuck, I'm in over my head. Let me use my clout and status to, exploit someone else to taking care of it for me. Again, really bad, huge L for Wong Kar-wai, but at least you'd be like, oh, it's just his old man brain rot. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely, really unfortunate. I'm not sure if Wong Kar-wai himself has actually responded to these allegations. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and it also, it made me think, hearing about how this person essentially wrote a lot of the script that then Wong Kar-wai supposedly took credit for. The only sense of that I can make is that, Wong Kar-wai doesn't feel secure enough to do a lot of original writing himself. These days, I've made this observation before, but much like a lot of the auteurs from the really independent, 90s underground cinema, people like Greg Araki, Wong Kar-wai did kind of fall off in the 2000s, like the later 2000s, 2010s. It seems like once he kind of escaped that underground, rebellious, youthful vibe that really characterized his 90s work, he never quite was able to figure out how to like mature into a different, older sort of filmmaker. Not to say that he didn't put out some decent stuff in the 2000s and 2010s, but nothing that ever really recaptured that vibe that he was known for in the 90s. So it makes me think that maybe, he just didn't feel confident or secure enough in actually being able to write a script. So he had to take credit. He had to take credit from this other person that did. Not that that's at all an excuse, but maybe something that happened.
Oh, 100%. And when you reference a film like Fallen Angel, which you brought up, it's so stylistically, I mean, all of his other work too, but I think that one, for me at least, that I've seen, like so rooted in that like Y2K style of the turn of the millennium. It was a style that was extremely popular, but for about 15 years, right? If that. And then it became kind of gauche. It became kind of like it was like out of fad. It was like, oh, if you're doing this, like, what are you doing? Like,
Yep.
it's kind of like not as successful anymore. People didn't get down with it. And then it became kind of like camp or something. I don't know the best way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and it's also just hard once you reach a certain level of esteem and success and mainstream credibility to kind of recapture that essence of the underground, of the rebellious youth. Again, much like Greg Araki, so many of Wong Kar-wai's movies were sort of about those kind of themes and stuff like that. So I do think he's one of those directors who just was never fully able, as an older man, to make art as successfully as he was a younger man. Maybe that's ageism, but that's just how it seems in his specific case to me. But here's a little bit more details. It says his talking about Gu Air, his patience ran out, and then came the leaked tapes. As the days went on, the releases became significantly more damning. In the later recordings, Wong can be heard talking about setting up a boot camp for aspiring writers, with the clear implication that he'd then steal their work. With both Wong and Quinn can be heard acknowledging that Gu had written most of Blossoms, contradicting the official credits entirely. They also make a range of sexist comments about women and about female audiences, remarks that have spread widely across Chinese platforms. So it's not just the exploitation. Apparently, there's also some sexist comments about women being made, which is unfortunate to hear. And then this is also pretty interesting. The recordings depict Wong publicly belittling Gu, mocking his condition and humiliating him for sport, even as Gu's ALS symptoms worsened. By the time the most recent tapes were released, public opinion in China had decisively turned. And again, it's not just that Wong Kar-wai is a hero in the West. Obviously, in China, he's a fucking titan of their cinema. So many Chinese filmmakers obviously are incredibly inspired by Wong Kar-wai. Think of him as this godfather of independent Hong Kong cinema, in the same way that we would think about someone like Richard Linklater or the Coen brothers, one of these gods of the 90s. So this is really really put a black mark on a record of someone who not only was, of course, celebrated for their cinema, but again, just if someone were to say, hey, do you think Wong Kar-wai would be a nice guy? I'd say, yeah, he seems like he'd probably be lovely. Yeah. Seems like a great dude, just based on his movies. Obviously, there's only so much you can glean from someone's art, but that's all I was basing it on. I don't even think I've ever seen a fucking interview with Wong Kar-wai. I've never really gotten to know him as a person. I only know him through his art, and based on his art, I would never guess that he was capable of this cruelty.
Yeah, it really reminds me, and again, obviously, Wong Kar-wai hasn't been accused of anything this heinous, okay? But the description, the passage Gavin just read, paints him as kind of a fucking monster, kind of a fucking bad guy. Like, you're making fun. You're a grown man. We're not digging up 12-year-old Wong Kar-wai in the 6th grade. He was a real douchebag. He made fun of this kid with the fucking stammer. All right, no, we're talking about like a 65-year-old grown-ass man making fun of another individual suffering from a debilitating disease that will end your life, ALS. All right? If you don't know anybody who's ever had ALS, it is one of the most fucked up things you can look at. Like, no, that's like crude. I just mean it's debilitating. It's horrible. There's like, it eats away at your whole fucking body, man. It's just not fucking good, right? It's a tremendous struggle. You would never, ever knock or humiliate somebody because of that condition. It would be worse than making fun of somebody for fucking cancer, because you watch what these people go through. It's insane, right? But then I started to think, Evan, as we're having this conversation, about a month ago, we went and saw a movie that, dare I say, with no other information, I'm reading it as a feminist film directed by a feminist filmmaker, right? But because of what we know about this man, nobody would ever say that. And I'm, of course, referencing Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski made a film that was rich, that was sympathetic to women's plight, that I think had a lot to say about the problems with our society. And then he himself was a misogynistic, evil, psychopathic sex predator, okay, behind the scenes. So we do have to understand that what we're shown from these artists might not be a true reflection of them. Doesn't mean that their art doesn't have value. But boy, is it depressing. I feel like a little pit in my stomach right now thinking that Wong Kar-wai is like a real bastard.
I know it is unfortunate, mostly because, again, it's just not something I would have suspected about the guy. Not that I ever knew much about him in his personal life, but it's just, again, not something I ever would have guessed about Wong Kar-wai. Seems like a crazy person to be so cruel and apparently abusive and exploitative, which, again, is really unfortunate. That being said, again, obviously it doesn't lessen the impact of his work. His films are still great and influential and deserve to be studied as some of the best international cinema of the 1990s and 2000s. 100% huge influence on me. But yeah, I mean, this is a huge disappointment. It's a huge disappointment. And it sucks to see that not only do we now know what we know about Wong Kar-wai as a person, but it probably will prevent some sort of a grand, creative return that I frankly had been dreaming about ever since I first got into Wong Kar-wai. I remember back in like 2013, I was getting into Wong Kar-wai, and he had this movie coming up called The Grandmaster, which I was really excited for because it was his first film since I think 2006 when he came out with My Blueberry Nights. And I was like, oh shit, this is Wong Kar-wai's big return, The Grandmaster. It came out, it was decent, but it kind of came and went, and we didn't hear from Wong Kar-wai for another 10 years, not until this new TV show, Shanghai Blossoms or whatever it's called. And to me, I was like, okay, let's go. He's doing this show. That's going to hopefully reignite his passion for cinema, and we'll get some seriously good late period Wong Kar-wai work. That's what I was excited for. And now, not only obviously does this news about his personal behavior dim my excitement, but it also makes it seem like that's just not going to happen, because I don't think that he's going to get the financing necessary to do that, given the controversy, not just what we've talked about, but also in China. It looks like he's dealing with some issues with the CCP, as it says here. Yet I don't even think what I've written so far is what will get Wong canceled in China. What's more likely to be the culprit is the tapes that also contain disparaging comments about the Chinese government and its COVID-era policies. Wong reportedly describes the CCP as a greedy, one-party state. That alone is often enough to end a filmmaker's mainland career. Combined with the rest, it's difficult to imagine a path forward for him in China. So again, even if the audiences and even if the public was able to find forgiveness, for this incorrigible behavior, this unacceptable conduct, it seems like, he's not going to be able to get the funding he needs from the Chinese government itself, who was behind the Shanghai Blossom show. From what I understand, I think to make basically anything in China, you have to have the backing of the government.